probably heard it 1,000 times. Roth is always better. You need to be doing Roth conversions. Roth, Roth, Roth. In this video, I want to show you why Roth might not always be better. And oftentimes, even for those with pensions, traditional is the better option. And I'm going to go through a real-life case study to show you how a couple is going to be better off because they chose traditional over Roth. Hi everybody, my name is Jon Lee. I'm a tax professor and CPA, and I love maximizing after-tax cash flows for people because I know tax is in everything. And if you can learn how to maximize your tax savings in your life, you'll be much better off financially. This is the 4th episode of my series, Retire Smarter with a Pension. The first episode, I give you a free version of what I call my Financial Independence Plan software, MyFi plan, where you can create a baseline plan for yourself. And there's a lot of power in just that first episode and what you can create from that. Second episode, I go through the 401k match and how valuable that is. And the third, the HSA, which is my favorite tax savings account. So if you missed those, go back and catch up, because this fourth one, at this point, we've already saved this couple an extra 80 grand in value with those first two strategies. Starting with the baseline, those first two strategies, we already got them an extra 80 grand. We're going to get them a bunch more today. But I'm going to address this Roth versus traditional decision. And to do this, I've kind of revamped some of the charts in the MyFi plan software just to show you why we would make this decision Roth versus traditional, okay? And I want, first of all, to show you, okay, this couple, we're projected to have 2.24 million at retirement. We've already saved them about 6 grand in tax with the first two videos just this year. And then their projected final net worth is 8.4 million, okay? So let's go down. And it may seem high. This couple has a pension, they have Social Security. That's why they have a lot of fixed income, and they're not even going to have to spend from their nest egg because of those fixed income sources. So later on in the plan, we're going to look at possibilities for spending down some of that. But I wanted to show you, first of all, their lifetime effective tax rates, because this is the part where people say, you're going to get killed by taxes later on, that's why fund Roth, okay? Right now, 2025, they're in the 26%. Their baseline plan was 26% effective tax. And this effective tax rate, I'm including all taxes and surcharges, IRMA, everything, okay? And you can see they're pretty high in their working career, 24, 26. Then it's dropping off as the husband retires, and then as the wife retires, it drops off even more before they start collecting Social Security, etc. Okay? So there's a lot of planning that we can do in this area. But you can see their tax rates in retirement, even with the healthy pension, Social Security, and everything, 13. And then RMDs kick in. Now they're at 16, 17. You know how people are like, once you're in RMDs, you're going to get killed. Well, that's not the case. They do jump to 22 once the husband's projected to pass away, 86 versus 89 for the wife. So there's that widower's penalty, but you can see it's not even super significant even with that, okay? So this is going to depend on, I mean, if we have 3-4 million in a traditional account and a pension, etc., that might make a difference. They're going to have 800,000 when they retire, which is still a good sum, and the RMDs still aren't going to kill them. So I wanted to show you that first, and that's part of the reason why they're choosing traditional, but there's other reasons. And you can see the tax brackets that they're in. I have this chart where it shows your taxable income and your tax brackets, and you can see they're in the 22% in those first years, and they're a little higher in the 22 once RMDs kick in. They're never hit 24 until that widower's penalty, right? And then they start hitting 24. But you can see as a percentage of their total income, I mean, cash flows, there's still a ton of cash flow even with paying a little more tax, okay? So you can see these charts have all of it. It's kind of fun to see the income sources and the tax results. So that being said, let's jump back to our plan and look at their next strategy, which is they don't have much time to save on current year taxes, okay, because they're both about to retire. So in the current year, when they both worked, they started with a tax liability of about 62,000 total. We've dropped, with our first few strategies, we've dropped that to 57. We're going to try to drop that even more through contributions to traditional retirement accounts instead of Roth, and we're going to see why. So the projection number 6, the 6th projection is they're going to fund their 401k and 457 plans, max them out for the most part, and then invest the tax savings in Roth. Because well, I say they need to go traditional. You want to be funding Roths anyway, your Roth IRAs separately. But what I'm saying is maybe don't go all Roth. So in this case, the husband, so we're going to go to our tax planning tab where we can apply our current year tax strategies. And if we go down to where we funded his 401k match, he ends up putting in about $26,025 into traditional 401k, tax deferred, because they want the tax savings this year. Additionally, the wife, because they're between the ages of 60 and 63, they get the additional catch-up, which is $11,250 instead of the $7,500. So they're able to put in additional. So she's going to do equals $23,500, which is your normal for the max you can put in, plus that catch-up of $11,250 for 60 to 63-year-olds. Okay, so and they're 63, so they just made it, right? So $34,750 she can put in a 401k. And you're seeing, hopefully you saw how that changed the retirement and final net worth immediately. And that's because, really, if you're taking that money, that's why the budget aspect is so important. Because in this current year projection, they had a bunch, before we started all of the tax planning, they were going to have $100,000 that they could put in a brokerage account. They're in their highest earning years, expenses are lower, etc. House is paid off, so there's real money that can be invested and put in different places. They're using a lot of strategy to decrease their tax liability. So instead of putting it all in a brokerage account, which isn't bad, they're dividing it between HSAs, 401ks, and just doing a lot of cool tax strategy to maximize their savings. Before we started was $108,000. Just in the current year, our total savings is up to $139 because of all the tax strategy we're doing. Okay, so they've saved an additional almost $31,000. And part of that is they've saved 20 grand in tax this year. And if they're doing Roth, they're not getting that. And we'll look at that. So that 20 grand, they're spreading it out over these accounts. Okay, so we funded those accounts, but because they saved that amount, remember, I want to be funding Roths too. So they've saved 20 grand in tax. That 50 grand that they were going to put in a brokerage, why not? Let's put a bunch of it in Roth, so we're getting that tax-free growth. Okay, so that 19,920, I wanted them putting all the tax savings into Roth. So they both can put $8,000 into their Roth IRAs, right? So that's going to max out both of their Roth IRAs with the tax savings from their investment plans. And then we're going to have the wife put another 3920, which was the 16,000 plus the 3920 is 19,920, into the Roth 403b, because she can fund a 403b and 457. Okay, so you can see their final net worth has increased by a bit, and so let's go look at that. Let's go over to our projections. Current year, we saved a bunch of tax, and we're going to set projection 6 now that we've added those 401k matches, because we want to see, okay, we're taking a lot of money and putting it in different places to save additional tax. Okay, we just saved another, looks like 14 grand in tax compared to where we were with the HSA. Okay, which at retirement, projection 3, we're at 2.24 million, now we're at 2.26, almost an additional $40,000 that you have saved at retirement. And then final net worth is up. Projection 3, we were up 80, we're up 82 now. Okay, which, why isn't there a big difference between those two? How this is set up, what we did is we just took a bunch of taxable money that was in our taxable account, and put it in tax deferred account. So this is set up to say, okay, anything in tax deferred, if there's 1.4 million left in tax deferred, on the profile page we said we're assuming our heirs have a 26.5% tax rate, okay, which could be high, could be low. We're going to show how we can minimize that, and also how we can minimize that ending balance anyway. So just initially, it doesn't look like a lot of tax. I mean, overall, we retire with 40 grand more, but you're going to pay tax on it later. Okay, that's tax deferred. We're going to look at ways that we can plan for that 1.4 million to minimize it. Okay, and that's what I love about traditional, because if you're all Roth, you lose your planning opportunities gone at that point. It's like it's all growing tax free, but now later on, tax planning, there's just less opportunity for it. Okay, so projection 7, let's do the Roth and look at the difference. So in our tax planning tab, we are going to, that 26,025, we're going to take it out of traditional and put it in the Roth 401k, 26,025. And on And then let's delete the Roth IRA contributions for now because we're just changing that strategy. For the wife, that $34,750, this is an important point to bring up. In 2026, they've changed the rules to where that additional catch-up of $11,250 is going to have to go into Roth versus instead of traditional. Instead of getting the big tax deduction, they're saying you have to put it in Roth, okay? But that only applies if your W-2, box 3, if your FICA wages were over 150, so per each spouse. So in this case, they wouldn't have to worry about that anyway. But keep that in mind. So Roth 401k, they're going to do that 23,500 plus 11,250. So they're throwing it all in Roth, plus they're going to put the match in Roth, which we're going to do 100% and 100%. Okay, so what does that look like? Current year tax savings. Remember how we were saving almost 20 grand in taxes this year, less that we're not going to have to pay? Now we're only saving $2,666 because of our HSA stuff. Part of that is due to we threw the employer match into Roth as well. So we're just trying to max out as much Roth as possible. Okay, and you'll see final net worth looks higher right now. We've only saved an extra $11,000. So at retirement, we're not as high, right? Compared to the other. Let's go to our projections and set projection 7. So you can see we're a lot better. I mean, we're getting an extra 18 plus, yeah, so 36,000 doing the Roth route versus traditional in final net worth, even though retirement net worth were lower, but the taxes were deferred, right? So it looks quite a bit better to do the Roth in this case. Part of the reason is because of the tax rate we chose on our profile. So if we change that to, let's say, what if our heirs were at 12%? Okay, you can see how important that final tax rate is because then you're much better off doing traditional. So it's all like that tax rate is so important, right? Because that just has a significant effect on, yeah, it's going to skyrocket substantially if you're a lower tax rate for traditional as well. So let's jump back to 26.5 there. Okay, so Roth is looking better. What are some considerations that make, and that's why everyone says, Roth, look, this is better, right? And what are some things that this couple is going to end up doing that will make traditional better for them? Once they turn 70, in this future planning tab, they're going to be doing what's called QCDs because they're very charitable anyway. So at 70 and a half, they're already giving 20 grand to charity. By paying that 20 grand straight from their tax deferred accounts, if we do a QCD of 20 grand here, every time they do that, it's going to save them 5 to 6 grand in tax every year. Okay, so if you're a charitable person, that is one of the first things you need to look at. And it might be good to have a healthy, traditional 401k tax deferred because then you're taking that money out tax free. So you're getting a deduction on the front end. You're giving 20 to charity anyway. Why not give it tax free? So you never pay tax on it. So that's why that planning strategy you lose if you're all Roth. So these are things that you want to consider, okay? And this couple, they're obviously very charitable, but watch how this gets even better. In projection 6, end of life, they have 1.4 in tax deferred. What they could do is give that to charity, okay? And this $373,000 they were paying in tax is gone. They don't have to pay tax on it. And because they're doing so well, they wouldn't need to give all of this money to their kids. Maybe they have these charitable things that they're passionate about. They could still give to their kids or heirs. They could still give $7.4 million to their heirs and give 1.4 to charity and never pay tax on that tax deferred, right? So these are strategies you want to consider. If you have charitable goals like I would love to do this and I could give a large sum of money to maximize that, why not do traditional, get the deduction on the front end if you're never going to pay tax on it anyway? These are some strategies you can apply. So, and this is what they're doing. So projection 8, to reflect that strategy, we're going to say their tax at end of life is going to be 0 because they're just giving whatever's left to charity. So if we set projection, and we're on Roth, so we're going to set projection 9 because 7 and 9 are going to be Roth, 6 and 8 will be traditional. So that, look how much that jumps their final net worth because they're not paying that extra tax. So they're able to give that much more, well, 7.57 to charity or to their heirs, and then the additional 1.22 to charity, and in the other case it was 7.2. So they're still giving more to their heirs, and they're giving a bunch to charity as well. Okay, so projection 8. Now let's go back, because 8.795 is if they did Roth. What if they're using that same strategy? Wouldn't they be better off by doing traditional? Because then they're getting the tax savings on the front end and able to give that to charity. So let's look at the traditional. We're going to do traditional. I'm going to do 34,750. We're just going to go back to where we were, 26,025, and then 8 grand in each of their Roth IRAs, and that extra 3920 of tax savings in the 403b. Look at how much they come out even further ahead by doing traditional, because, and this is only for a year or two that they got that extra tax savings, but that got them the extra 16 grand to obviously give to charity and to their heirs. It depends on your goals. You need to look at, what are your goals? Do you want to be able to give a lot to charity? In the next videos, we're going to go through the QCD strategy and how that's just every year, you know, 6,000 a year for 20 years. I mean, results in substantial wealth accumulation. So you want to look at those goals that you have in retirement, okay? Especially if you're charitable, you want to be looking at these charitable and traditional strategies. The other thing I want you to look at really quick that I built in is in the profile. I want you to look at potential increases in tax rates, okay? So let's look at our charts again, actually, really quick before that. Effective tax rates. So we've done, look how much, you know, that end of life strategy. We're doing all these strategies at the end of life that, you know, you drop your tax rate to 0% instead of that 27, okay? And that year before was that HSA distribution. I might spread that over multiple years to decrease those other years, right? And then you'll see once we do QCDs, the decrease in tax here as well. So the thing I wanted to show you with these effective tax rates is, on the profile, you can project, okay, what if tax rates, like when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was due to expire, they were expected to, and that would have been 2026, so we could model that. In 2026, let's say tax rates went up by 20%, which was about what they projected for middle class. So you can look at the effect on your final net worth, but let's look at the dashboard, and it shows you, okay, the baseline, we were at 13, 16. If taxes go up 20%, we're still at 15, 19, 20, you know, so it's not going to absolutely kill you. Even if, you know, everyone was saying, if you don't convert to Roth, you're in trouble. Even with IRMA built in and everything else, you're not in that bad a shape, okay? And you can even project like ridiculous things like, what if tax rates double on retirees? And let's think about it first. Why do tax rates need to go up at some point here? Social Security is not going to be fully funded in 12 years, right, or less. So they need to find a way to fund that. Are they going to tax retirees higher when that's the case? No, they're going to either raise Social Security tax rate, they're going to raise the threshold for how much you have to pay Social Security on. So they could do retirees, right? But a lot of times the arguments that are given for why taxes are going to go up on retirees don't make a lot of sense to me. And a lot of times it results in people making these decisions like huge Roth conversions, and it might be, you know, when you're looking at your dashboard, these are years where the cash flow, the difference between outflows and inflows is low, and if you're doing these massive Roth conversions, you know, when in reality later on in your retirement you're going to be well above, because you all have all that excess cash, but you know, you might make yourself suffer early on because of these strategies that maybe the fear of these huge taxes later on in retirement shouldn't even be there, okay? So, yeah, even with, I put 100% increase in tax. Look, you're still just hitting the 30%, okay? So, you know, that widower tax, effective tax rate of 37%. But even in that case, if taxes doubled, she still has net cash flow that it exceeds her outflows, which matches here. So, I mean, she's not hurting any more here than she was here, but you're just paying more tax. So these are things everyone should consider when they're looking at doing Roth conversions or funding traditional versus Roth. And for this couple, we went with scenario 6. Okay, so in that projection, the comparison, they went with scenario 6. So they're funding those traditional accounts. They're saving 20 grand in tax this year, and they're going to go do something with it, right? And then in the next video, we're going to jump into some awesome charitable contribution strategies, okay? If you found this helpful, please like it. That helps other people see it. Subscribe to the channel as well, and then share it. If you know especially someone with a pension that can see this, where they're being told you're going to be killed by taxes later, if someone with a pension can see this and be like, oh, it's not going to be that bad, that can help you. And run and grab the free version. That'll also give you a clear picture of kind of where you're starting. And yeah, have a good one, guys. We'll see you in the next one.